Welcome to the show. Another series of basketball news. We're going to get into Eastern Conference previews, standings, try to figure that whole mess out down there in the East. It's a pretty hard one to call because there's so many bad teams down the bottom. And then get to a little bit of NBL at the end of the show. Pro news, what you got?
Nothing, Bogues. Was down in Disney for a week. Ate like a pig and only gained 4 pounds. Sign me up every year to go to Disney, my friend. So that's about it.
They have a lot of vegan options for you there, right?
Not many vegan options, but there was a lot of electric scooters and a lot of torn ACLs there. So I think the Portland medical staff was their doctor of choice down in Orlando. So everyone, it seems like every third person had a knee injury. So
you see the Lopez twins there?
Did not see the Lopez twins. Those are my Disney guys, but not. No. For one of the first times I've ever been there that I didn't see a Lopez. But
I think Brooke brought a property on. Just a side note, I think he bought a property on the Disney complex. Yeah, the houses there.
They have a section. Yeah, they have a section down there. I think when they opened it, it was like $400,000 to buy houses there. Now you can't get a property there for like under $4.5 million. But yeah, I think Brooke bought property down there. So
yeah, I think a former teammate of mine, Barbosa, as well. I think he has a property on that property as well. Pretty cool if you like Disney, but he doesn't like Disney. He just liked the property. So, all right, just some quick news before we get to the standings, because obviously the standings conversation takes a fair chunk of time. A quick one. I don't know if you saw this, Pro, but the NBA has agreed with its betting partners to no longer allow bets on players who are on 2-way or 10-day contracts. So
yeah, that makes sense.
They called it the Jonte Porter rule.
Yeah, I also heard something about they're trying to get that the NBA is trying to get the under on like stat category betting, is that they're trying to get the under wiped out from. I don't know if it's just across the platform or what, where you can't bet on the negative side of it. So for like Porter, what he did. So yeah, that was interesting. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, it's seems like a no-brainer, but once you get involved with betting as a league, there's gonna be more and more of this stuff come up. It's obviously easier to take the under and throw a game if you're throwing a game as a player to get the under, but they can do this. Technically, if you're the star player and your over's 20 points, and you get one of your boys to bet on you that you'll be the over, you can just shoot 40 field goals for that night. It's a similar type thing, although those guys are a smaller group of players that could do that. So, I mean, this is when you get involved with betting, you got to deal with the ramifications. I don't know if this changes everything or fixes everything. I think this is more of a reactive move by the NBA to say, hey, we're a clean league, we're trying to do everything above board. But yeah, just found it interesting that it's a 2-way and 10-day contracts you can't bet on. And it makes sense because we discussed this at the time. That's what I said. I said, shit, if you're a guy on a 10-day contract, it's making like, maybe making $100,000, $50,000 for what are the 10 days? Not even that, right, bro? It's not even that.
It's like, I mean, it's probably like $55,000 for a 10-day or something like that, 40 to 50, not counting taxes.
Yeah,
but
so
it's about 40
let's say
to
you're
50.
clearing $25,000 for the 10 days, but you get some nefarious people, mafia, whatever, bookies say, hey, take the under on whatever, we'll give you $200,000. Well, there you go. That's 10 days worth of money. So, and also we discussed guys that are getting call-ups, 2-way guys. They're the guys that you can easily influence. So I think it makes sense there. But, like I said, there's crazier things that we've seen. And we said from the start, like, there's people today that would be somehow giving betting information, whether on purpose or not, in the NBA. NFL, Major League Baseball. If you think it's zero, you're an idiot. I don't think it's an epidemic by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there is people that probably have given information to friends or uncles, aunties, bookies to make bets. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, without question. I think anything that's sort of introduced to you, there's going to be a group of people that just find an evil a way to turn it evil. It sort of circumvent rules and, for financial gain or power gain. And I definitely think anytime you put money, you put yourself into the whole betting world, it just you open the floodgates up with, corruption and how to circumvent the rules to make somebody money. So, yeah, I mean, I think they'll try to continue to tweak it the best they can, but it's almost impossible. Somebody's going to find a way to do something, Yeah,
it's also wild because you can bet now these days. I don't know if you know, Pro. You can bet on like minor league stuff all the way down to like, let's say, Australian state soccer leagues, second division soccer leagues. Like it's just absolutely wild. So like, there were some issues here in Australia many years ago where there was a soccer league, like fourth division Victorian soccer league, getting like heavy bets put on it from overseas. Like, what the fuck's going on? And there were dudes throwing games, and it's just kind of like, that's like you said, whenever you involve money, evil intentions come out of the boons.
Folks, anytime in life when you could bet on the Super Bowl what color the Gatorade is going to be, and if there's somebody going to get thrown out for streaking the field. So, I mean, come on. Like, you could bet on anything. And it's
bet there is and streak yourself.
Yeah, no, that's what somebody did. There's a bunch of people who've been doing that. They think the fine is like, I don't know, whatever. The fine's like $5,000, plus to get a post bail, and then you get, I don't know, you bet a couple of $100,000 or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
suppose it's just
no brainer.
Yeah.
No brainer. I've got great betting stories, which probably aren't for this podcast, but I've got friends that people I've played poker with that are basically professional bettors, and they have some absolutely hilarious stories of how they've navigated ways to manipulate wins. They're banned on every betting app. They use aliases. What they do now is they use so say you're some rich dude who didn't give a shit and you run up $1 million on a betting app. That guy will then hire these analytics geniuses that know how to bet and try to get back some of that million. And then the guy will give them a kick, because at least they'll be allowed to put big bets on using that guy's account. That's how crazy it goes now. It's like there's all these little schemes going, and I was talking to a few guys about it, and it's pretty crazy. And the betting companies are on it. Like a couple of my friends open a betting account, and within like 2 days they get banned, and they have to go to a different route. And even Harrell Boss told us. Remember, he had a bunch of lackeys just starting accounts for him that he was doing stuff for back in the day, to try and get access to betting apps because he just couldn't register himself. As soon as they saw his name or anything to do with his name, it's like instant ban. So they don't want you to win.
Crazy.
They don't want you to win too much. You got to make sure you're losing. But one other thing that popped up, Pro, I think this is a media beat up, but it made news in Australia. Kyrie Irving to the Australian national team, Pro. It was big news over here. I think Kyrie was asked by an Australian journalist and said, yeah, he'd love to entertain the idea and would definitely put his hand up. I think the Team USA thing, doors closed for him. I think with all the stuff that he's been through the last 4 or 5 years, I think they kind of wanted to stray away from Kyrie, and I think he probably knows that. But for all the people getting excited, you ever rarely see a player like that. First and foremost, USA basketball will do everything they can to block it. Secondly, you ever rarely see a first world nation go to a first world nation. FIBA ever really allow that. They'll allow a first world nation player to go to a country of origin, roots, migration, which we see a lot with South Sudan and some of these countries. You ever really see it this way. So I don't think it's even possible. I don't think FIBA would allow it. I think they'll do everything in their power not to allow it, even though he was born here and only lived here until he was 6 or 7 months old. But just an interesting one that came up, Pro. I mean, the separate question is, I'd love it. Like for our national team to get a bona fide scorer that can give you buckets, that is a guy you don't have to run anything for, is a guy you can throw the ball to with the last 3 minutes of the game, something we've never really had. Like all-star level, done. So if we can do it, sign me up. Separate conversation, do I think it's realistic and can happen? I don't think FIBA allows it, Pro. I don't know what your thoughts are, but it's interesting.
I think it'll be fantastic, to have. I mean, it just sort of shifts the power a little bit, as far as to the Boomers as, being a legitimate, I know it's 4 years away, but it would give you a legitimate superstar on your team, to go ahead with the rest of the guys that are pretty close. So it would be great. Like you said, FIBA may not allow it, but you never know. You never know, especially it depends on how much he really wants it and then how much he fights it. And, I don't think I don't think they're gonna really put their foot down, and if they're gonna make a big stink about it. But I mean, it's so far away. You don't really know. Look, Kyrie had a hell of a year last year. Who knows what's gonna happen with him 3 years from now with injuries and things like that, and and all that. And does he want to spend his off season and doing FIBA and all that? So
shit, it's only 4 to
deal.
5 weeks these days. It's not like it was back in the day. FIBA's, it's basically a 4 to 5 week commitment from camp to event. So when I first started, it was 3 months. So it's really changed there. And he's probably only got one tournament in him with his age. He's in his early 30s. So, it just is interesting to see this came up again. I don't think there's fans out there. Let me know. I don't know of many players that have been superstar players that have gone from a first world nation to another first world nation. Like I said, the FIBA usually frowns upon it. I don't think there's many that have done that. I did examples otherwise that are star players like that, and I think that's why FIBA will just shake their head. But interesting one nonetheless. Hope it happens though, but I just don't think it will. We'll get into our Eastern Conference standings now. So if you want to jump into that, we're going to put that on a separate episode, which is just all about the Eastern Conference standings. So you'll find that after this episode. Give that a click and a listen, which gives you our picks and standings for the Eastern Conference. But right now, we will get straight to NBL. So a lot going on this week in the NBL. A lot of movement, a lot of things going on. First and foremost, Aaron Baines has officially retired. Trent, career numbers in the NBA, 6 points a game, 4.5 rebounds, 9.5 points and 6 rebounds in the NBL. Look, I know he copped a lot of shit playing in the NBL with the way he went about things, and he's a fiery fella, but I mean, this guy is the epitome of grinded out career. When you look at where he started and where he ended, a Cairns product, not known, solid NBL program, but not known for producing NBA level talent. Born in New Zealand, went to Washington State for 4 years with Clay Thompson, Brock Modem, different guys, goes undrafted in 2009, and then just grinds through the European leagues, Lithuania. He was with Ritas, he was with Oldenburg, Greece, went to Slovenia, played for Olympia, ends up getting a lifeline from San Antonio when Brett Brown was there. Turns out into just being a workhorse in the gym, gets his body right, plays some G League ball, signs a decent deal with the Pistons, then goes, Boston, Phoenix, Toronto, finishes his career in Brisbane. But just a guy that etched out a career, was very raw early, but big body, strong, athletic, and just grinded out a great career. So congratulations to him. I hope he saw him a couple of weeks ago at a Brisbane game. Looks to be in good spirits, and we hope that he finds his next path and next journey in life. But a fantastic career for a guy that squeezed every bit of juice out of himself. So he was good. He was real good at just being a contributor, Trent.
Yeah, and probably one of our more successful NBA guys ever. Over 300 games in the league, which doesn't happen very often, and also very easily couldn't have been that with the way the league kind of went to the big shooting the ball, spreading the floor. He then adapted his game and completely evolved as a player and turned himself more into a stretch big, which I think is the most impressive part about it, which then, obviously contributed massively to our success as a national team as well, as you would know, playing with him and stuff. But yeah, it was good. It was good to see it, the kind of the response he got across social and stuff. A lot of people seem to respect and admire what he was able to do over his 15 years.
Yeah, and a fiery fella. We got into it many times at Boomers camps, and he's a guy that's going to fight you tooth and nail. And with him and I as the 1-2 punch for the bigs of the Boomers, it was in a good spot. But big, strong, physical bigs that would beat up the opposition, and I enjoyed being his teammate for all those years. Mike Kelly is officially gone after losing the Toilet Bowl, the Brisbane versus Southeast matchup, which was dubbed the Toilet Bowl by me. They were both 0-4 whatever. Loses that game. They probably should have won that game. I watched it. They had control of it at one point, and they just couldn't shut the door on Brisbane. Brisbane came back and won. And Josh King now has been announced as the Southeast Melbourne coach. So Sam McKinnon takes over for one game. They get their first win. They beat Melbourne United, lackluster Melbourne United, which we'll get to in a second. But they sign Josh King. I don't know too much about this guy, Trent. He's from Durus Faka in the Turkish Basketball Super League. Previously coached in Ludwigsburg in Germany in the Bundesliga. Established career in the coaching ranks. Don't know too much about him, so I'll be interested to see how it goes. Preaches defense first from what I've heard, but you hear that about everybody when they come over here, so it'll be interesting to see how they go. Following that up into Southeast Melbourne, beating Melbourne United. I mean, I said this at the start of the season. Walton Jr. and Sobey was just such a clunky fit because they're high usage guys on the court. They both need the ball in their hands. Walton Jr. goes out with an injury early in this game. Sobey, although made some mistakes here and there, but ball's back in his hands, clear of who's the guy, they win the game. I'm not saying that's a formula, but I just don't know if they coexist that well and end up beating Melbourne United. It also shows the importance of Ely, I think, for Melbourne United. He was sorely missed there, but Southeast get their first win, and now another new coach.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they looked a lot better with Wieskamp coming off the bench. I think him in that starting role just doesn't work defensively, and he's a high volume guy, right? So he needs to see it go through for him and his confidence. Otherwise, he kind of becomes just a bit of a weird floater. He tries to draw a contact. He doesn't get the calls he wants. So I liked what Sam did, bringing him off the bench. And then to your point, yeah, as soon as someone had clear control, I think Glover did a really good job in that game, kind of dictating the pace of the offense. And yeah, I think also Melbourne shooting themselves in the foot with Chris Goulding shouldering Geordie Hunter into Delhi. But I mean,
I was lucky too. Delhi was very lucky to escape. That looked really nasty.
Looked really nasty. Very, very questionable play from Chris. I understand all of Geordie was just. I've never seen anyone flop that much in the league, but. Yeah, so I think they got lucky there, but I just think overall the way that Sam made those adjustments, kind of bringing Wieskamp off the bench, giving Glover more of a kind of controlling role, I think kind of just made things flow a bit better. You saw Malik Lewis get the start and kind of have a lot more, time on the ball in that 4 spot, which I think looks really good for them with Geordie, because then there's not as much pressure on Geordie to make decisions and have the ball in his hands. So I just think structurally they looked a lot better in that game.
Yeah, I think they did. It just seemed more balanced with the way it should look flow wise. And they were, Sobey made some huge plays late. He offensively made some big blunders again, but he made 2 key steals for layups late in the game there. But yeah, they're rebranding this game to the flop down from the throwdown officially, because it was. Look, I think this whole weekend of basketball, Kings game included, was an ugly round of basketball. It was just ugly. Every game was ugly. There was no nice flow to any of the games. It just was shit. I'm being honest, including the team I'm part of, the Sydney Kings. It was the shit round. I think basketball lost this week in the NBL, if we're being honest, and it's harsh. And sometimes you have these rounds. The NBA has them, EuroLeague has them, where you have a couple of weeks where it's like, oh, this is just shit to watch. And it just wasn't nice. It wasn't. I don't know what it was, whether it was the matchups, just all the hype around Southeast Melbourne not winning the game, argy-bargy. But that Melbourne Southeast Melbourne game just epitomised what the whole round was on a Sunday. One of the last games, shut the door on a shit round with just crap. It was, if that was your first game of basketball, you probably wouldn't go back. So hopefully next week is much better. The Jack McVeigh stuff, let me clear it up again. I spoke about it last week, a couple of weeks ago. For those of you who are clickbaited by the NBL account, again, that's not my problem. Listen to the pod and get my whole spiel on these kind of things. It's blatantly obvious that Tasmania were holding pat, thinking that Jack McVeigh could be back. Does that mean they wanted him to fail? No. Does that mean I wanted him to fail? Of course not. I want him to succeed. 1, because I love seeing Australians do well over there. And 2, because I'm a owner of a rival club. I don't want him back in the NBL. I don't want him back playing for Tasmania by any means. I don't want him shooting 1 foot step backs on us. Go play somewhere else. Don't come back to the NBL. So this should not have been taken as a negative, but it being clickbaited into a clip, and then people are firing up. You guys are idiots. Just relax. He's doing a phenomenal job. It's just been announced that his 2-way has held. He has not been waived. Sensational news. Hope he doesn't come back. But Tasmania, they were clearly holding a spot, and it's backfired. They no disrespect to Ruben Tarangi, but if you're replacing the loss of Jack McVeigh, Ruben Tarangi, you're in some trouble roster-wise. They were holding a spot to see if it'd be available. Watch them make a move now in the next couple of weeks. They have to make a move. They cannot score in bunches. Sydney's super lucky to beat them, but Tasmania just couldn't score late in the game. Sydney should not have won that game by any means. Sydney were poor for 3 quarters, stole it in the 4th, but I think Tasmania's got some issues on that roster. They just Milton Doyle struggling to score. If it's not Crawford or Doyle, they just don't have enough. And I think the injury of McDonald definitely plays a part, but there's something missing there. I think Sword's going to probably be the unfortunate one that probably gets moved for another import. I think Magnay is the marquee there, so that will solidify their roster. But they definitely need something at that 4 spot that can come in and make some noise for them.
Yeah, and it's kind of been their story. Outside the whooping from Illawarra, they've just been in every single game they've played in and kind of, shown that kind of Tasmania grit and grind. But you're right. Like, if it's not Crawford, if it's not Doyle, it's just coming from nowhere. And you can see, like, they got certain guys like Clint and Drimmick that will, like, and Deng at times as well, that can have stretches where they look really good offensively, but just consistently they can't perform for them, and you can see where McVeigh is missing with that lineup. And I didn't know much about Craig Sword before this year. I thought he potentially might, he looked in the blitz, he looked like a solid 2 guard that could come off the bench and kind of score in bunches for them, but he hasn't turned out that way. So I think you're right. They would have been dumb to not leave a spot open for McVeigh.
Yeah.
So that was the right move by them. But over these next couple of weeks, if they don't make a move, they're going to be fighting for that 6th spot at absolute best.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, it's going to be telling to see their season's on the brink right now. The losses are racking up, so it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. Sydney, I touched on, like I said, disappointing game from the Sydney Kings, even though there was a win. Super lucky to be 5-2, in my opinion. I think we're very, very lucky to be there, but it is early. We're not trying to win a championship in October or November, but a lot of things to clean up, and probably the depth, which comes up every telecast you listen to. They're so deep. Oh my God, they're so deep. Yes, we are. But it's probably not working for us at the moment. I think the minutes are being shared around, trying to find rotations that work. Tyler's really played into some minutes and played very, very well. Sean Bruce has that game against Cairns a couple of weekends ago where he shoots the piss out of the ball. So it's starting to kind of settle a little bit, but it's not there yet. There's still a lot of work to do. So it'll be interesting to see how that all goes. Brisbane win again versus New Zealand, so they're 2 on the trot. Bateman probably saved his job. Trent, he looked like he was in some trouble the first couple of 3 or 4 games. Even when I saw him live, he kind of didn't know what he did, and he does seem like a grinder. He seems like a guy who's going to try to grind it out and try to figure out a way, and he's played his way back into being a decent import in the league. So he's made some shots, and is it sustainable long term? I don't know. They've had a bit of a cupcake schedule for their wins, obviously beating New Zealand and Southeast Melbourne, but can only beat what's in front of you. And I still don't have them as a top 6 team, but it's good to see them have a bit of life.
Yeah, I was at the game. Kind of like what you said, it was an ugly round. Like, I was watching the game and it was not a pretty game to watch. Super high turnover. I think for them, they go as far as Tyrell goes. Like, Bateman had a great game, but a lot of that came off Tyrell getting to the hoop early, and creates that vacuum effect where Bateman got a lot of kind of offensive rebound threes where he could kind of walk into it and kind of get a rhythm going. So it was good to see them get a win. New Zealand was right into it till the last couple of minutes there, but their point guard just wasn't able to hit shots down the stretch, where it could have been a very different story if he had made a couple of threes that he had put up. So I don't know. I still think, they were lucky to face New Zealand coming off the America trip. Like, they're probably tired. They've just had 3-4 preseason games in the States. So I don't know how much, like, you take it as what it is kind of thing. So it'll be interesting because they've got a pretty tough schedule from here on out.
They do. It will be very interesting. But New Zealand then bounced back and beat a somewhat cottonless Perth. I mean, Cotton still haven't received word of what his deal is. They say it's a rib injury. I watched a replay. It looked like it was when he put his hand on the floor. It jolted something in there. But the fact that he was cleared to fly, not being being an injury expert, I've broken my rib. Generally, if you break your rib, they're not going to let you jump on a plane straight away, because there's a chance that if there's a puncture through a lung or there's a shard of the rib that could cause you harm with your internal organs, they won't let you get on a plane because of the cabin pressure. The fact they let him get on a plane might be muscular, might be a tear. So you can tear cartilage there, that is very, very painful and can cause you issues, but not a long-term issue. So maybe they've dodged a bullet there, but I think still will be out for a little while, but better than a broken rib. And the Sydney Kings play them on Friday, but they absolutely capitulated when they lost him against New Zealand. Well, I think Perth still should win that game without Bryce. I think a sign of good teams is when you're missing your best player, you got to find during a regular season in the NBA and the NBL, you got to find a couple of wins. In the NBA, it's generally 5 or 6. In the NBL, it's 1 or 2 where your best player is not playing. You got to find a way to win 1 or 2 of those games in the NBL. Perth haven't proven that yet, and they're still a pretty stacked roster without him. Let's be honest. So you hope to see him healthy. You hope to see him come back. And a side note, he's a free agent. There's a lot of talk about what's going on with him, whether he will stay in Perth. He's getting up there in age, so I think probably at his peak right now as far as form. I think it's probably downside moving forward, and people are going to fire up at that. But age is undefeated. I mean, he's going to start to see a decline in the way he plays, especially with how up and down and movement-based he plays. But he is a free agent, so there's a lot of teams that will be knocking on the door, and worst case scenario, just drive up the price for Perth, keep him. So hopefully that happens too. But he's definitely going to be a guy that a lot of people look at, and there's also the overseas intrigue that people will look at there too. But it'll be interesting to see how Perth sustain no Cotton on that roster.
Yeah, I think even with Cotton, they haven't looked good. They had that terrible loss to Melbourne United where they got pumped by 30 at home, and then I think off the back of that in the same round they lost to Tassie. They had a great round, a good win last round kind of against Cairns. They won by 3. Cotton had a really big game, but it was kind of scary because Cairns had been up and down, and if it's going to take Cotton to have 25-35 for you to win against a team like Cairns, I think, especially without Cotton, I think they're in some pretty big trouble. So I don't know how they figure that out. I think for them the key is like figuring out the Windler-Pepper situation. I think they're very similar players, and it looks like Riley's confused on who to use and when, and rotation-wise how Bryce then fits within that, because you can see teams just double and blitz Bryce, and then it's Perth don't know what to do. You get it in the hands of their 4-5s, and Doolittle can score, but once that's not working, not a great decision maker, and Keanu hasn't looked good all year.
Pinder's a big one. I mean, he's their marquee guy, big money guy. They got to find ways to get him more involved, and I think he's struggled. You can see he's clearly struggled of when to go himself, do his thing. When it's Cotton time, I think he's struggled to figure that out. But with Cotton out, maybe he revamps himself. JR looks to go towards him more. Doolittle's been probably their best consistent player, I think, on that team. He's really taken a. Wasn't high on him last season early on, and then he grinded his way through a slump. But he can actually shoot the ball better than I thought. He gets to his spots. He's physical. He plays defense. So I've liked the way he's gone about things. So, but Perth is staring down the barrel. You know, they're currently sitting outside of the 6. They're 2-4 in 8th place, facing the Kings there on Friday, which will be interesting. Illawarra lose to Cairns. Illawarra beat Cairns, in which Cairns were probably in that game all throughout, till right in the 4th quarter, where Illawarra just stepped on their throats. I mean, Illawarra is just a professional outfit that's going to just eventually turn a game to their favour because they just continue to play the same way. Very good bench. Olbrich and Davo comes on. Hickey does a really, really good job. So they got a really good balanced roster, and I think they're the early season championship favourites, in my opinion, with the way they're playing. They seem to have it all together. Can they sustain it for a season? Who knows? And then Adelaide, they have signed Harrell for the rest of the season. Some people have said no NBA out. I don't know what the intricacies are of that, but good signing for them. I mean, he's great for the league. He's great for them. Joel Martin made his comeback. They struggled to put Tasmania away early, much like the Kings, and then Tasmania just capitulated. I mean, Tasmania arguably could have been 2-0 this weekend, but ended up just giving up 2 games, but Adelaide are back in the mix. So Illawarra first at the moment, New Zealand second. I don't see New Zealand staying there for that long, but they do have a pretty cupcake schedule the next month. They've got a lot of bottom teams. They've got Southeast Melbourne coming this week. We'll just see if King gets in coaching that one. Sydney 3rd, Melbourne 4th, Adelaide 5th, and Cairns 6th. Brisbane, Perth, Tasmania, Southeast Melbourne. If I throw you all those, who do you think, who are we swapping out of the 6 and who are we putting in from the 4?
So I think New Zealand falls out of the 6. I think Illawarra, Kings, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Cairns. I would have them all in the 6. I think the two teams that will be fighting for that
Tassie,
final
Perth.
spot will be Tassie, Perth. Perth completely up in the air. I have no idea. And then Tassie, depending on what moves they make in the coming weeks and what they decide to do with the roster. But that's what I think the 6 looks like by the end of the
Yeah,
season.
pretty close. I'd agree. I think it's Perth and Tassie can jump out of there potentially, depending on what Tassie does. But I mean, look, this is one of those seasons. I think if you get too far down on that loss column early, you're going to struggle to reel it back. And Perth notoriously have that road schedule coming pretty soon. You know, so with the Hopman Cup, I think it is the tennis that comes and boots them out for a while. You know, you want to be at least 500 when you go on those road trips. Even though historically they have bonded on those trips, but if it's a different story when you're 7-7 compared to 3-10. You know, so. That'll be interesting, but yeah, I think you're pretty spot on. I mean, it's hard to call. I mean, Cairns, a lot of people had them picked last, you know, and they battle though. They play hard, and they got. I love Edwards. I mean, people don't. He's a love or hate type guy, but I love imports that come over and give a shit. And he's fiery. He's up talking shit to opposition coaches. You hate to play against him, but I like guys like that. Imports that come and give a shit. Got a lot of time for because we get a lot of imports over here that sometimes are too cool for school and just want to get their numbers. Let me make my money, and then I'll go to China and make some more money towards the end of that season. Where he seems like he gives a shit. So Cairns do a phenomenal job of. They continuously find those guys that play hard and play well, and they've got some injury issues. They're missing
Tanner Groves.
Yep. So he's got an injury that he's battling, so he'll be back as well, and he's a big part of what they do. Yeah. So he comes back next week. They'll probably get some wins. Just to close off, I don't know. Have you seen this NBL shootout concept?
No, I was reading it and I thought I didn't know if you had made it up or not. Or
I didn't make it up. No,
I was like, it's intricate. It's intricate.
So the NBL has put together a proposal that is $150K in prize money for fans and teams. Each team nominates one away game during the first month of 2025, or we can just say January because I don't think that changes. It's always January. Nominates one game in January in which they believe they will score the most points versus. At the completion of the 10 nominated games, the club which scored the highest points totals in their nominated contest will win $50K to split between club and players, and then the fans will obviously reap some benefits of the rest of the money. I'm not sure. I mean, I saw this. There were talks about some other stuff that they were trying to introduce that were discussed at numerous times. I won't divulge because it's obviously confidential, but this one's come public. I just don't like gimmick stuff. I really don't like it. I understand that there's people that have there's NBL's off the record concerns to media where there were concerns around the holidays and getting people engaged with the game, and this might engage them. Shit, with the Sydney Kings, that's our best time of the year. The school holidays are when we get bums on seats. We love that time of year. Like, I don't know, we love it because people will come out. A lot of people that can't afford to go holidays overseas are staying in Sydney and they'll come to games and then enjoy the environment. So we love the school holiday time. But yeah, I mean, interested to see how it goes. It's one of those things that you scratch your head at to see whether it'll create a splash or not, throwing money at things. I mean, the other thing is, I think there's a clause in there that if multiple teams pick the same team and they do some sort of draw, it can't all be the same team. But I mean, it's just I don't know. Fans out there, NBL fans, let me know what you think of it. You think it's too gimmicky? I just think the game needs to be celebrated. Like, the game is what we're watching. Let's not try to get too far ahead of ourselves with gimmick shit because you're going to piss off your core base. Yeah, you're going to bring in an influencer or two, and you're going to bring in a star, a celebrity, and oh wow, and then they're all going to be talking about it for a week, and they're going to go back to MasterChef and The Bachelor and all that kind of shit, right? Your core fans eventually just going to be like, I just want to watch basketball. So I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
It feels like old NBL. It feels like desperate NBL. The NBL that's like, finding and looking for absolutely anything to like help grow the game, whereas it's in a place now, and I think we've spoken about it at length, just where they don't need to do that anymore. Like, from their media coverage, from everything they do, I think they've really refined it back to here's the product. We're one of the best leagues in the world. Enjoy. And they've gotten rid of a lot of the like weird in between stuff that they did. Whereas this kind of feels again like Kardashian style, like look at me kind of vibe. Like, it just doesn't feel necessary. It doesn't feel like it has any sort of purpose. I don't think the players will care. So you're not going to get the result that you think you're going to get. I don't know. I'd rather see like an all-star game or something like that reintroduced into the league than something like this. Like, if you're trying to get something where you're getting fans in that you don't normally get in for a week, and you just want them to look at the NBL for a week, like reintroduce the All-Star game or something along those lines where the players will get behind it. Something like this is like a new concept, untested. I just feel stupid.
And I'm a big advocate of one concept a year. We've already had Hoop Fest, which is a whole new concept. Let's see how that runs for a couple of years and then introduce a new one. Like you said, it reeks of desperation somewhat, where you're like, what can we try? Let's just throw money at this and maybe that'll bring you. Just like, we don't need that. I think the league's in a good spot as far as fan engagement, participation, and you're only really engaging to people that are part-timers and that might not come back again. So hopefully I'm proven wrong. As I've said, this
is being implemented. Like
this is done. Yeah, this is happening in January.
Okay.
So it'll get a media blast, obviously, in some point in January, and we've spoken about. But I mean, it just 50K split between the players. It gives the players an extra. What is that, $3,500?
Yeah, for your DPs and stuff, that's great. But for your Bryce Cottons and stuff, like, they're not getting out of bed for $3,500.
Or you're not, if you're a head coach and you're up by 30 and you're like, let's get that extra 50, you're gonna really ride your Bryce Cottons or your Jalen Adams or your Xavier Cooks to try and get to 50 to win the 50K, and then there's the injury. Then there's the complete opposite debate about the stuff. So that's an interesting one as well. So, but we'll see how it goes, and that's basically all the NBL news. It is ramping up to be a close season. A lot going on. A lot of big games every weekend. Look forward to it, and let's just hope this round is more of a basketball round than what we saw the last weekend. All right, let's wrap it up. It's another show. Thank you everyone for joining us. Make sure you share, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and we'll see you all next week with our Western Conference standings and more NBL and NBA news.